Okay, thank you for joining us for the second in this series of Summit Society presentations. And today we have Jake Wilson from the Texas Presbyterian Foundation, who is joining us to speak on the topic of empowering your legacy for generations, ways to provide for your heirs and the organizations you love through tools that allow you to give beyond your checkbook. And Jake, I would love to turn it over to you to give a brief bio of your role with TPF and how long you've been there. And TPF is a mission partner of James L. West and First Presbyterian Church, to which James L. West is a mission partner. And they act as an extension of the development office of the West Center in helping us launch the Summit Society and our planned giving programs at James L. West. And so I'll turn it over to you, Jake, and then you can launch in your presentation. We'll start, and then we'll just ask questions as we go along.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kathy. I appreciate you inviting me to speak at today's Summit Society seminar. My name is Jake Wilson. As Kathy said, I'm a relationship manager at Texas Presbyterian Foundation. I've been at TPF for over 8 years now, which is hard to believe. I've held a couple of roles at TPF, but for the last several years, my job has basically been to work with our current mission partners at TPF, working to help make sure that all of their investment needs are met and that they're happy and well positioned when it comes to their investment funds, but then also working with them on the legacy planning piece and having conversations with the various nonprofit organizations TPF works with, as well as those donors, and helping continue mission work for years to come. So I'm a native Texan. I went to Austin College, which is a small Presbyterian school up in Sherman, Texas, and I feel very blessed to be able to work in this line of work because I feel like it's quite rewarding. So I'm going to share my screen now. I've have a presentation that I've got here, and Kathy, I believe that you're going to be able to send this out and share this with participants today and those that might want it. You can see my email address there at the bottom of the screen, jake.wilson@tpf.org. So reach out to me or reach out to Kathy if you would like us to send this to you, or if you have any questions following today's seminar. So to get started with, we have we have a scripture here that I think is very appropriate to kind of prime all of our minds when we consider legacy giving, when we consider planned giving and the importance of that. So Matthew 6:19-21 says, "Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." I think those are beautiful and appropriate words. And whenever I have these conversations, I always like to start with that scripture. So the first question that I think really is the most appropriate is, who leaves a legacy? And the short answer to that is, we all do. Whether it's an intended legacy or unintended, whether it's something that we made the intentional effort to do or not, we all make some sort of an impact on the world, on those that we know, our loved ones, and those that we don't know so well, those that are kind of on the outskirts of our cloud of witnesses. But the actions that we do every day leave some sort of footprints on the world after we've left. And those can be, as I'd mentioned, good things that we really strove to achieve, and then things that are completely oblivious to us. So I think that while we're all here, we all have the ability to do so, we need to be intentional about the legacy that we leave. And I think that when you're starting to scramble in your mind, like, oh my gosh, how do I want to be remembered? What stories do I want loved ones to tell about me when I'm gone? I think the questions that I always like to start with when you're trying to formulate that and be intentional about that are right here on this page. I think that, these questions to consider when you're getting started are really crucial because obviously I think we all want to be highly regarded and thought of in a positive light when we pass on. But if we're really trying to get down to the nuts and bolts of it, what does our legacy look like? And so these are some things that I encourage you all to consider. Write these down and maybe think of it on your own, or perhaps, sit down with your family or loved ones and see what they think about these questions. And the first one is, what would a better world look like for you? So visualizing a better world, thinking of what kind of destination we want to arrive at, because unless you can visualize what you want the world to look like, unless you can visualize that destination, how can you even start the journey? And then if all of your needs were met for the rest of your life, as well as your family's, and you had an abundance of money in the bank, what would you do with it? Obviously, this is not a really common circumstance. Not all of us are so blessed that money, is no concern. But if hypothetically that were the case, what would you do with all of your extra resources? How much of those resources do you leave to your family? How much of that is too much? We all have different circumstances. Family dynamics are different. Some of us, have children or grandchildren, nieces, nephews that need to be supported. Some of us don't have children, or some of us do have children, but they are better off than we even were. And they say, Mom, Dad, I don't really need quite as much support. And so you can find other avenues to place those funds at. So every dynamic is different. Every circumstance is different. So think about that within your own life. And then finally, this question is a little bit more abstract, but where do you spend your time and energy? I think that's something important to consider. Do you enjoy nature? Do you enjoy being outdoors? Do you like going to church? Are you very involved in a particular cause or a purpose? Perhaps you have a great appreciation for the arts. Think about where you like to spend your time and energy. And then once those are kind of thought about, you think about, okay, this is what I care about. I visualize this. I loved doing this in my lifetime, and I want future generations to also be able to appreciate the things that I did when I was here. The next thing to think about is the timing. So let's say we kind of have an idea of the legacy we want to leave, and maybe we thought of some organizations that can help carry out that legacy. We found some avenues to really, pass our blessing on to the future generations. What is the most appropriate timing for that? Is it now? Perhaps you want to leave a legacy gift or make a gift to an organization to where you can see the positive impact of your gift. You can see the fruits of that labor now, or perhaps at death. Maybe you have things that you want to take care of today. Perhaps you want to make sure that your family or your spouse is well taken care of. And upon your passing, you're ready to make a legacy gift. Or even later, years down the road, perhaps you want to support an organization for a decade or even forever, in perpetuity after your passing. So the timing is also important to consider. So once you kind of have a rough idea of the legacy you want to leave and then sort of the timing of that, we can start whittling down to various vehicles that can help you accomplish that. Now, these planning tools here on this page are just some of the vehicles that we at Texas Presbyterian Foundation that we offer, that we can administer for you. And so I'm going to kind of talk through these and work through these, and some of these terms I'm sure are somewhat familiar to those of you joining us, but some of these may not be so familiar to you. So, I'm going to work through the kind of basics of each of these vehicles. I encourage you to submit questions to us and to reach out to us if you want to learn more. But I'm going to kind of give an overview of each of these tools here. One of the tools that I want to start out with is an estate planning checklist. Reach out to us if you want a copy of this, or if you ask for this presentation. If Kathy sends this to you, you'll be able to just print out these pages, but this is basically a checklist that you can go through to say, okay, I've got this in place, I've got this gathered up. These are all items that I encourage you to, get your ducks in a row, get your house in order now, so that when you do pass, your loved ones or your executor isn't scrambling trying to get things in order. So I think that this is a very crucial tool that you can check off and saying, okay, I've got all of these items. This is where they are. This is who needs to be responsible for this. So this is simply a checklist. But the first plan giving tool that we're going to talk about today is a bequest. Most people are pretty familiar with these. It's pretty common that folks have bequests in their wills. And as this image, the message in the bottle, kind of illustrates, is that this is an important message that you leave behind to loved ones and to various beneficiaries. It may be a lump sum or a percentage of an entire estate. And this is one of those gifts that are made at your death. So it allows for no immediate dispersal of assets. So it is amendable, but upon your passing, you're leaving a gift to a charitable organization. For in this instance, let's say you want to leave a gift for James L. West upon your passing, and it can be a certain dollar amount or perhaps a percentage of your overall estate. And in this presentation here on this page, you can see various suggested bequest language that you can simply insert into your will, you codicil to your will. Maybe you are, revamping your will, or perhaps, you're drafting it for the first time. I encourage everyone to have a will drafted, because we never know when we're going to be called home. But this is just simple example language here. On this page, some of it is tailored a little bit to, if you were giving to a church, kind of given the nature of a lot of the organizations TPF works with, but you can very easily, edit this and tailor this to your need to, I give and bequeath X amount to James L. West or to this charitable organization. And you can simply take this language, fill in the blanks and insert it into your will.
Perfect. And Jake, one quick note, we have sample bequest language on the James L. West website under the giving information and donor information. And so all of these provide a framework, for language that can be dropped into an existing document.
Wonderful. Thank you for pointing that out. And I encourage you all, don't hesitate to ask those questions, to reach out, to say, hey, this is what I want to do. How can I best go about it? Because there's been so many people that have been in the same situation, and you don't have to reinvent the wheel, if you will. You can simply reach out and ask for guidance, and the resources are there for you. So the next plan giving vehicle that I'm going to talk about is an endowment. And like bequest, this is a very common term that I'm sure many people have heard of, but maybe they don't have a really deep understanding of what an endowment exactly is. To quickly touch on these bullet points on the page, endowments are carefully stewarded and professionally managed assets that, generally speaking, are permanent funds, and they are preserved in perpetuity, and that the income from an endowment, the growth of the fund, is what is used to fund charitable purposes or the operations of a nonprofit institution, to fund mission work, whereas the corpus, the original gift amount, is preserved in perpetuity for years and years to come. So it leaves a lasting legacy for many, many generations into the future. That is the general kind of terminology that defines an endowment. However, there is a little bit of flexibility in how you can establish an endowment. If you're wanting to establish an endowment, perhaps to fund a certain purpose or mission for a set number of years, you can certainly do that. We'll look at an example in just a moment.
And from the perspective, Jake, of endowments, you hear of major universities with hundreds of millions of dollars in their endowment, which of course help to fund their operations and scholarships and things. But are endowments always numbered in the millions of dollars? Can you
Not
talk
at
a
all.
little bit about what those look like for more traditional donors?
Certainly. Yes. The term endowment, oftentimes we mentally attach that, as you mentioned, to a large amount of money, with a very big or very old or established institution. But by no means is that the end all be all definition of what an endowment is. Endowments look like all sorts of various things. And in fact, at TPF, you can establish an endowment for $1,000. Oftentimes, people will set up an endowment with a relatively modest gift of seed money that other folks add to over time, and it's invested over time, and it gradually grows into something that's quite impressive. But by no means do endowments always start out with some huge dollar amount. Here on the page, obviously, endowments can mean the difference between sustainability and collapse for many nonprofit institutions. Working, with over 500 different nonprofits across the country of all shapes and sizes, organizations that have, 100 million plus in endowment dollars, and those that have, less than $10,000, in permanent funds. We've really seen, a trend of kind of eye-opening to the importance of an endowment fund, because as the markets and as the economy ebbs and flows, endowments provide that support that when things are difficult. For instance, when the pandemic hit in early 2020, a lot of nonprofit institutions were greatly impacted by that because perhaps they had consistent donors that regularly gave to the organization, and perhaps they passed away. Well, that organization felt that. Or perhaps the rough economy that we saw in the pandemic, and especially what we're seeing now with high inflation, a lot of people don't have the extra income to be able to donate. And so that also impacts organizations. Well, if there's an endowment fund that you as an individual have established to support that organization, or orphan institution has set up an endowment for themselves, utilizing the income from that endowment really helps weather that storm, if you will. Down at the bottom, you can see that institutions of all shapes and sizes are dependent upon their annual campaign to continue their mission and ministry. And as congregants of churches and donors to nonprofit institutions age, the pool of dedicated givers continue to shrink. Mm-hmm. And to combat that, what we can do is, as individuals, basically endow our annual contribution or endow our giving to an organization. And Kathy, as you just asked, an endowment, if you set up an endowment, it doesn't have to be some large, some monstrous dollar amount. It can be quite modest. Let's look at this example here on the right page of Jack Wilkie. Jack, who's 78 years old, he was a longtime supporter of a nonprofit institution. He didn't have any kids of his own, and he'd been supporting this local nonprofit for decades through contributions to their annual campaign. And he knows that the annual campaign funds that he's been donating to are used to continue the daily operations and the wonderful mission work of that organization. So what Jack decided to do to make sure that he could continue to support the organization even after he wasn't here anymore is he established an endowment with TPF that includes a bequest to give that nonprofit that he loves so much $3,000 over the next 10 years. So in his will, he stipulated that $30,000 would be donated to TPF, basically as trustee of this endowment fund, upon his death for the purpose of continuing to fund his annual gift. So TPF will make the annual payments to that nonprofit organization for 10 years. And in the 10th and final year, TPF will send the final payment plus all of the accumulated growth from the investment, because that endowment fund, it would be prudently and professionally invested in a very balanced style strategy that would allow it to gradually grow over time. So over that decade, it's distributing $3,000 each year to that nonprofit. But that 10th and final payment will also be larger. It'll have the bonus of that accumulated investment growth that will then pass on to the nonprofit organization. So Jackie does plan to leave an outright gift for his estate. He's got it earmarked for enhancements to their facility, but he wanted to make sure that the regular ongoing operations of the organization will continue for the decade following his passing. And in the event that he did want to establish an endowment that would leave his $3,000 annual contribution in perpetuity forever, he would then need to set aside $75,000 to fund that endowment. So the kind of industry standard when it comes to endowment funds is distributing a 4% spend rate that would enable the corpus to be preserved and over time gradually grow, but also distribute funds annually. So if you take 4% of $75,000, well, that would be your $3,000 his annual contribution. However, due to the needs of his family, he had nieces and nephews that he wanted to make sure were taken care of and got through school and everything. Jack did not want to remove such a large amount from his estate, but that $30,000 for 10 years, was the perfect middle ground for him. And it doesn't have to be 10 years, doesn't have to be 30,000. We've seen people set funds up for, $5,000 or $10,000 that distributed $2,000 each year for 5 years, or perhaps a different number of years or a larger or smaller amount. So everyone's situation is different, but this is kind of a groundwork or kind of a structure that TPF we found works really well for individuals that they want to endow their gift for a certain number of years, allowing other individuals and other donors to grow into their previous level of generosity, continuing the support of that organization.
Is there, Jake, a maximum number of years that someone can identify? And then today's conversation is about empowering your legacy for generations. And this is a beautiful example of the way that the gentleman's legacy could continue, well past his passing. Yeah, and so what does that term of years look like for an endowment?
Well, as I'd said, you don't have to have a limit on it. They can last into perpetuity forever. And sometimes an individual will, say, okay, I do want this to be a permanent endowment that will continue to make distributions forever. But what happens if something occurs several years down the road and this organization that I have listed as the beneficiary, let's say they cease to exist or something happens, then what happens to my endowment? Well, you can obviously set up contingency plans and put in alternate beneficiaries in there. Obviously there are things that we can do to make sure that your funds will continue to support causes that are important to you. But yeah, there's really no limit to how long you can support an organization. It's really up to you and your wishes.
And one other question: what type of gift actually is the most beneficial to use to create an endowment? Is it appreciated stock, or what does that look like? Or is there one?
Well, appreciate, at least at TPF, we like to receive, gifts of appreciated stock, securities, or cash. Liquidity is better. And I think that goes for most organizations. It's always good to check if you're making a gift, whether it's just an outright gift or whatever. If you're making a gift, it's always good to make sure you do a little bit of due diligence and understand the gift acceptance policies of the organization. If you're wanting to leave a gift, maybe an outright gift with James L. West, reach out to Kathy, reach out to them to make sure that, you've got everything established and you check with their gift acceptance policy. But I think that the general trend and the consensus is that the greater level of liquidity, the better. Yeah. So the next type of plan giving vehicle that I want to touch on is the donor advised fund. We've seen a huge increase in popularity in this type of vehicle in recent years. They've been around for a long time, but I really think the last decade we've seen quite an explosion in the number of people finding out about and utilizing donor advised funds. And this is a type of plan giving vehicle that really offers the donor the greatest deal of flexibility in their giving. I think that the image of the rubber bands here is pretty appropriate when we think about the flexibility of a donor advised fund. So with the donor advised fund, it offers you flexible, timely ways to give to various charitable organizations. So unlike kind of the rigidity of a endowment that has a specific beneficiary for a specific amount over a set number of years, a donor advised fund is something that you set up, enabling you to make various gifts at different times to various organizations, whenever you think it's most appropriate. When you set up a donor advised fund, you get an immediate charitable tax deduction. So that's beneficial in offsetting maybe a significant taxable income event in that year, but you don't necessarily have to make the distribution right away. It enables you to have anonymous giving. And it's oftentimes a donor advised fund, all of the fun parts of having a private foundation or a family foundation, but you don't have all the red tape and requirements that a family foundation entails. So you're able to set up this donor advised fund, and once you set that, establish that fund at TPF or whatever administrative organization you choose, it's there, it's invested, and then you basically become the advisor on that. And you write in and say, TPF, please make a distribution from my donor advised fund make a distribution of $1,000 and send that to James L. West. And perhaps, a couple months down the road, you say, oh, I heard about this church in town that, they recently suffered a fire. So please make a distribution of this dollar amount to help support their recovery efforts. Or maybe you want to make a distribution of a certain dollar amount to the annual campaign of your alma mater. And the beauty of the donor advised fund is, when you set the fund up, that's when you get the charitable tax deduction. But maybe when you need that tax deduction, you're not quite sure when or to what organization or for how much you want to make the gift. And so you basically become that advisor and say, you know what, I'm ready to make a gift for this dollar amount. And the most beautiful thing with the donor advised fund, I think, is that it really encourages and enables generosity between various generations. Because let's say you set up a donor advised fund and you're the advisor on that, and you've been advising TPF to make distributions to nonprofit causes. Well, you can then model that generosity for your children and then pass that role of advisor on to them in the future, so that they then become an advisor to that fund and direct future gifts to 501c3 charities that are important to them. So it's really a beautiful tool, and we've seen a lot of popularity with donor advised funds.
So Jake, one quick question.
Yeah.
Who is the ideal donor for donor advised fund? And then once you make the initial gift, are you prohibited from making additional contributions to the donor advised fund?
Those are some great questions. So I'll answer those in reverse. No, you are not prohibited from making additional contributions to a donor advised fund. Much like an endowment, you can add funds to it. Let's say you set up an endowment today, other individuals can add funds to that. With the donor advised fund as well, you can add additional funds to a donor advised fund to grow it.
Oh, excuse me. And what is the minimum amount? If I were to enter into a partnership with TPF to create a donor advised fund, what would the expectation be of the amount of money I would provide?
At TPF, the minimum to set up a donor advised fund is $1,000. So, and that goes for the endowment as well. $1,000 is the minimum to set up a donor advised fund. So quite a low minimum. And again, there are other organizations that administer donor advised funds, various other foundations that administer them. They may have different minimums, but at TPF it's 1,000. And your other question was, what would a donor, the ideal donor for a donor advised fund look like? And the answer to that would be the individual that wants to see the immediate impact of their generosity. So, when we think back to that timing slide about whether you want to make a gift now, at death, or in the future, this is now. This is something that you would establish that, maybe you're a young person, maybe you're a young professional that feels the want to be, generous, or perhaps, you have an event in your life where you need an immediate charitable tax deduction. When we see that circumstance quite often. So with the donor advised fund, I really think that there's a very broad, audience that a donor advised fund would be appealing to. It would be ideal for someone that says, I've got a pretty large number of various organizations that I want to support. Perhaps you want to support James L. West, but you also want to support your church as well as your alma mater. Maybe you want to make occasional distributions to other nonprofits that you find have a need. So a donor advised fund provides that really large level of flexibility. The next plan giving vehicle is a charitable gift annuity. Unlike the donor advised fund, this does not have quite as much flexibility. This type of vehicle is when you make a one-time irrevocable contribution of assets to a charitable entity or administrative entity. So in this case, let's say TPF, and based on your life expectancy, based on the actuarial tables, you will receive a fixed payment back for the remainder of your life. And then upon your passing, or perhaps the passing of you and your spouse, if you've set it up as a 2-life annuity, the remainder of that fund then passes to James L. West or the other charitable beneficiary that you have outlined. So this is a type of vehicle, unlike a donor advised fund, when, it doesn't really matter what age you are, it can be an appropriate gift. With a charitable gift annuity, it's probably most beneficial for individuals that are at least retirement age or later, because you receive that fixed payment back on a regular basis. It helps supplement you in a way, during retirement, in addition to maybe your retirement fund distributions or Social Security. You would also get those fixed payments back from your charitable gift annuity. But ultimately, upon your passing, because that fund is invested, generating a little bit of income, whatever's left is then going to pass to the charitable institution. Let's look at an illustration that might shed a little bit more color on how they work. So how do they work? So this is you over here on the left, the donor, and you make the one-time irrevocable contribution to the administrative charity. So in this case, TPF. And based on your life expectancy, and again, the older you are, the greater the fixed payment rate will be. The younger you are, the lower it is. So again, if you're very young, if you're in your 40s or 50s, you're going to get quite a bit smaller fixed payment. Whereas if you are in your 70s, 80s, 90s, it's going to be a much greater fixed payment back. You will receive those fixed payments back for the remainder of your life. And as I mentioned before, there's the option to set it up as a 2-life gift annuity. So it can also support your spouse for the remainder of their life. And then upon your passing, the remaining gift would then go as a one-time distribution to James L. West or whatever the charitable beneficiary is that you have specified in the gift annuity. Unlike donor advised funds or endowments, you cannot make additional contributions into your charitable gift annuity. So perhaps you're getting your fixed payments back and you think, you know what, I would like my fixed payments to be a little bit larger. So can I add more to it? Or perhaps I want there to be more left over for this organization, the charitable organization. Can I add more dollars to my gift annuity? No, you can't, but you can always set up another charitable gift annuity. And what we at TPF have seen is that usually when someone sets up a gift annuity, they set up a couple more. We've actually seen folks have 20 plus charitable gift annuities. And in some cases, all of those gift annuities are all leaving remainder gifts to the same organization, the same charity. In some cases, they set up lots of different gift annuities and they're all supporting different charities, but they're all distributing funds on fixed payments back to you to help support you for the remainder of your life.
And Jake, I might just use this slide specifically to talk about the value of the partnership between James L. West and TPF, because TPF is the administrative partner on these gift tools for James L. West because of the ability of TPF to manage the administrative side of the gift annuities and endowments and those type of things, and also the financial assets that need to be in place to support these investments. And so as a nonprofit partner, I have the ability to really leverage TPF to introduce opportunities to our donors, to make to create tools that provide for James L. West as we as an organization grow our charitable giving programs without having to have the added responsibility on our finance side to manage the reporting and administrative side of the gifts. That as partners, we come together in benefit to each other and really work off of our strengths.
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out, Kathy. Yeah, we at TPF, we're a 501c3 nonprofit. We consider ourselves a mission and a ministry, and our purpose is basically to help support the mission and ministry of other nonprofit organizations. We've got the staff, with our organization that have the experience and the ability to administer these gifts, and we've been around since 1925, Kathy. So we've got almost 100 years of experience in working with donors and working with nonprofits, and we administer hundreds of charitable gift annuities. So we've got a lot of insight and experience, and I just encourage you all, viewing this, to reach out to us if you have any questions about how any of this works, or perhaps you want to talk about your own circumstances and see what kind of gift might be most appropriate, or talk about what you envision, and maybe we can help with the conversation as to, okay, what kind of gift would best suit your desires. So we've got this illustration here, which is kind of very general, but I also want to show an illustration that attaches some numbers to it, so it's a little bit more concrete. Now, before I even start going into this, I do want to say that this is simply an educational illustration. This is not by any means tax or legal advice. I am not a tax professional. I am not an expert on tax law. So with your own circumstance, I encourage you to talk with your financial planner, your CPA, or your attorney to see what would best suit your circumstance. And then also the numbers on here, the payout rate, for instance, you see that for Miss Donor who's 80 years old, she would get a 6.8 annuity. Those annuity rates change on a pretty regular basis. We at TPF, we use the very kind of the industry standard, which is the American Council on Gift Annuities. They're kind of the central governing body that most all nonprofits kind of go off of when it comes to those payout rates. They update their payout rates on a very consistent basis, and so I encourage you to to not depend specifically on this graphic for what your annuity rate would be. For instance, as of July 1st of this year, an 80-year-old one life gift annuity would have a payout rate of 7%. So it's actually a little bit higher than what this shows. But again, that can change. But in this illustration, Miss Donor, who's 80 years old, sets up a gift annuity of $10,000. So she makes that one-time irrevocable contribution of assets to TPF. And based on her age, and in this illustration, which at this time, the annuity rate was 6.8%, she receives regular payments back to her of $680 a year. She can split that up into quarterly payments or however she wants it to look, but she receives those back for the rest of her life. And then upon her passing, because that charitable gift annuity was invested in TPF's balanced fund, a very kind of broadly diversified, modestly invested fund, it was growing. $7,000 is left over after she passed away that passes on to the charity that she's outlined. Now, some of those fixed payments that she receives back is considered tax-free, and of the $680 that she was receiving on a regular basis, that tax-free amount is $560. So her estimated one life payout is over $8,500, but then the charity also got $7,000. So she basically turned her $10,000 into over $15,000 because you take into account everything she got paid back to her, as well as the distribution to the charity at the end. So both sides are able to benefit from this. And yeah, I mean, that's basically how they operate in a nutshell. One of the questions that I often get from donors is, okay, what were to happen that I, really, live quite a few years longer than what my life expectancy is. And let's say I receive those fixed payments and I've actually lived so much past my life expectancy that gift annuity, the original gift that I made, is dwindled all the way down to zero. In that circumstance, TPF, we guarantee those fixed payments for the rest of your life. So we have our own endowment fund that helps, we use the income from that to help fund our operations. And then we have reserve funds that we guarantee the fixed payment for the rest of your life, as well as your spouse's if you've set it up as a 2-life. So you'll receive those fixed payments guaranteed. The only downside, obviously, is that there wouldn't be anything left over in the fund you established that would pass to the charity. So wonderful that you far outlived your life expectancy. And Kathy, you've probably heard this, but generous people typically live longer. So it's great that you lived longer than your life expectancy. You're going to continue to receive those fixed payments back. But then obviously there's not anything left over for the charity. So perhaps you can, add a codicil to your will that you would like to leave, a gift to the nonprofit at your passing. You could certainly do that. So that's what gift annuities look like. Again, the payout rates are changing on a regular basis. So if you want to know what the current rates are, you can obviously go to the ACGA, the American Council on Gift Annuities website, to see the most up-to-date rates. And then a tool that I really want to lift up to you is on the TPF website, www.tpf.org. When you go to tpf.org, you can go into the side of our website aimed at legacy giving, legacy solutions for individuals. And in that portion of our website, you'll find something called a gift calculator. Now, a gift calculator enables you to plug in your own information, your age, your tax information, and perhaps a few hypothetical dollar amounts that you're considering to set a charitable gift annuity up with. Maybe you want to look at $7,000, $10,000, $12,000, or maybe it's like, do I want to set up for $15,000 or $20,000? You can plug hypothetical dollar amounts in and fill out the rest of the the info boxes, and it will run an illustration for you that will look a lot like this that you see on this page. of saying, okay, if you made a gift amount of this much and based on your age, you would receive this dollar amount back on a regular basis. And this would be the projected dollar amount that would be left over for the charity that you specify. So you can play around with that, run those illustrations. It's not setting anything into motion, but it allows you to kind of get an idea of what that looks like. And you can, sit down with, your financial advisor and look at those. You can sit down with your family and run some illustrations. But I will say, if you do run an illustration and you print it off and you let it sit there for a few months, remember that you ought to go back and rerun the illustration with the new numbers because, as I said, the ACGA updates rates on a regular basis. TPF, we update our calculator with the latest rates. So just go back to the website and rerun a new illustration so that your numbers aren't too stale.
So I know you're going to move into questions. So a lot of people have their future wealth invested in life insurance. They're paying premiums now so that then if they're passing, there will be a large amount of money that comes to a nonprofit or goes to their family members. Is there anything a donor can do today, understanding that their largest gift will be made through life insurance, to utilize any of these tools? I mean, other than the bequest, they could put in their, estate plan, how their charitable instructions, but how could somebody use a future gift of life insurance to benefit a nonprofit?
Yeah, certainly they can, specify that the nonprofit is the beneficiary of that. We see it a lot where an individual, that they've set up a gift like that, and it's, and then they don't need to take advantage of it. They would, first I would say get in touch with the nonprofit. If they don't, unless they're wanting to be anonymous, they can get in touch with the nonprofit. And then also consult with, their, personal professionals that they work with to, get all of that ironed out. But I think that it's really crucial to, when you have the opportunity now, think about those things and have the conversations with your loved ones to make sure that there's no surprises, at the end. Because a lot of times an individual will have plans and they'll set something into motion or they'll put something in their will, but years down the road, circumstances have changed. And maybe there's, perhaps a family need for those funds. And so it's important to address that today. So.
Perfect. Well, I am excited to introduce these tools and further discuss sort of the partnership between James L. West and TPF. And we will have another opportunity in September to talk about another aspect of gift planning and this open line of communication that we're hoping is generated with family members and financial advisors and others. And we will focus in September on the importance of advanced care planning and making sure that loved ones, we call it letters to loved ones. It really is a gift to your family and your loved ones that they know what your wishes are. And it goes all the way back to the estate planning checklists, that our loved ones have all of the tools and things that they need as our lives on earth come to a close, because it is such an emotional, hard, difficult time. And so Jake, I'm thrilled that you were able to join us today. We value our partnership with TPF very, very much. And we are introducing our Summit Society. It's been in place since early. It was started in 2003, just 10 years after James L. West began. But as we move into our 30th year, we're really focused on sustainability for our organization. And so creating these gift planning tools and explaining how they work to our donors and others is really a step in that direction to really add value to our organization for decades to come. And so thank you so much, Jake, for joining us. And I will, for everyone who registered for the session, send a copy of the presentation and the link to today's recording, and then it will go up on the James L. West website as well. So we'll create a library of recordings. And so thank you so much, Jake, for your time today.
Well, thank you for inviting me. As I mentioned before, if you have any questions about any of these vehicles that we spoke about today, or perhaps you're just wanting to submit general questions, reach out to either me at jake.wilson@tpf.org, reach out to Kathy. I know that folks can reach out to development@jameslwest.org if they have any questions or inquiries. But thank you, Kathy. I appreciate all the wonderful work that James L. West does. And thank you all, for those of you viewing this today. Thank you for your generosity and all the great work that I know that you all do.